Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unapologetic. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto. This is a space where we have honest conversations about faith, wealth, wellness, relationships, personal growth, the beliefs we inherit, the patterns we repeat, and what it really looks like to build a life that feels aligned with who we're becoming. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to come back to have these conversations with me. And if you're new here, welcome. I hope you find something in today's conversation that makes you reflect, helps you understand yourself a little differently, or maybe puts words to something you've been feeling but haven't really known how to explain. Because that's really what I want this space to be. A place where we can slow down for a little bit, be honest with ourselves, question some of the things we've been taught, and become a little more intentional about what we want to carry forward and what maybe doesn't belong in the next version of our lives. So, whether you're listening while you're driving to work, going for a walk, at the gym, making dinner, getting ready for the day, or maybe you're just winding down and taking a little time for yourself, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I'm really glad you're here. And lately, I've been thinking about how strange adulthood actually is, because nobody ever sits you down one day and says, okay, you're an adult now. You don't have to ask us anymore. There's no official moment where somebody tells you, you can make your own decisions now. You don't need everybody to agree with you. You don't have to explain every choice you make. We just grow up. We just start working. We make our own money. We pay our own bills. We build careers. We create our own routines and our own lives. And somehow, even after all of that, a lot of us are still looking around before certain decisions and asking, is this okay? Maybe we're not really asking for permission anymore, but I think sometimes we're still looking for it, because sometimes the hardest part of making your own decisions isn't figuring out what you want. It's being okay with the fact that somebody else might not understand it. And I want to start here because I don't think permission seeking always looks the way we imagine it does. As adults, we're probably not walking up to our parents saying, Mom, am I allowed to do this? At least, hopefully not. But it can sound like, what do you think I should do? Do you think this is a bad idea? Would you do it? Do you think I'm making a mistake? Am I crazy for wanting this? And then maybe you ask your mom, and then your friend, and then another friend, then your partner, and then you Google it, and maybe you come and ask ChatGPT. And now you've collected 7 different opinions, and somehow you're more confused than when you started. And there's nothing wrong with asking for advice. Sometimes someone can see something we can't. Sometimes we genuinely need more information. Sometimes we need wisdom from somebody who's already been where we're trying to go. But sometimes we disguise permission seeking as asking for advice. We ask 5 people what they think when we already know what we want. Not because we need more information, but because we want somebody to say, yes, you're allowed. You're allowed to leave, you're allowed to stay, you're allowed to change your mind, you're allowed to say no, you're allowed to want something different. And sometimes we keep asking until somebody finally gives us the answer we wanted in the first place. So I have a prompt here for you guys, and I want you to actually think about this one. Think about the last big decision you asked multiple people about. Were you genuinely looking for advice, or were you looking for permission? Because if 5 people gave you 5 different answers, whose answer were you hoping would win? And before you asked anybody else, did you already know what you wanted to do? Because sometimes we already know. We're just looking for somebody else to tell us it's okay. And I know approval can feel safe, and I think there's a reason for that. There's a reason why it can feel so comforting. When everybody around you says, yes, you should absolutely do that, there's a little less weight on your shoulders. But when you make a decision nobody around you understands, now you have to own it. You have to be willing to say, I chose this, and that's vulnerable. Because what if it doesn't work? What if they were right? What if somebody says, I told you so? Sometimes collecting opinions gives us the illusion that if enough people agree with us, we can protect ourselves from making the wrong decision. But I think there's another part of this too. Sometimes we're not necessarily afraid of making the wrong decision. We're afraid of making a decision that disappoints somebody we love. Because it's one thing to trust yourself when everybody agrees with you. It's another thing to trust yourself while somebody you respect is saying, I don't think you should do this. And that's where I think we have to ask ourselves, can I believe that something is right for me without needing everyone I love to believe it's right for me too? Because someone can love you deeply and still disagree with you. Somebody can want the best for you and still not understand what you want. And sometimes the person whose approval you want might never give it to you. You could spend years trying to explain yourself well enough that everybody finally says, okay, now I get it. But what if they never do? How long are you willing to put your life on hold, waiting for somebody else to become comfortable with the way you're choosing to live it? And that doesn't mean the people who disagree with you are trying to control you. Sometimes they genuinely love you and are trying to protect you. But they're still looking at your decision through their experiences, fears, and values. And their disagreement doesn't automatically make your decision wrong. Maybe the permission you're waiting for isn't coming because it was never theirs to give in the first place. And this brings me to when making your own decisions feels like ingratitude. And I think this gets even more complicated when you come from a family where decisions were never really just about you. Especially if you're first generation, come from an immigrant family, or grew up watching the people around you sacrifice a lot to give you opportunities they didn't have. When you grow up knowing what people sacrifice for you, your choices can carry a different kind of weight. Because stability was everything. Education was everything. Getting a good job and creating a secure life was the goal. And then you grow up and realize, what if the life that feels right for me doesn't look exactly like the life they imagined for me? Maybe you want a different career. Maybe you want to move. Maybe you want to start something of your own. Maybe your definition of success is changing. And suddenly, making a big decision for yourself can start to feel like, am I being ungrateful? After everything they sacrificed, how can I say this isn't what I want? And I think this is where we have to separate two things that can feel very connected. Gratitude and obedience are not the same thing. You can be deeply grateful for what someone gave you without believing that gratitude means they get to decide the rest of your life. You can honor your parents' sacrifices and still make choices they wouldn't have made. You can appreciate where you came from and still want something different. And choosing differently doesn't automatically mean you're rejecting them. Sometimes you're simply using the opportunities they gave you to build a life that makes sense for you. So, I have another prompt here for you guys. Where in your life are you confusing disappointing someone with doing something wrong? Because those aren't always the same thing. Sometimes their disappointment comes from love, fear, or simply having a different idea of what a successful life should look like. And you can have compassion for that without turning their fear into your decision. And this brings me to something else I've been thinking about. If we're going to ask people for advice, why does everybody get a vote? We'll take career advice from somebody who hates their career, relationship advice from somebody whose relationships we don't want, money advice from someone whose financial priorities are completely different from ours, And I'm not saying those people can't have valuable perspectives, but everybody gives advice through their own lens, their experiences, their fears, their regrets, their values, the things that worked for them, the things that hurt them. So when somebody says, I would never do that, okay. But the question isn't always, would you do it? The question is, does it make sense for me? Because not everybody has the same values, priorities, risk tolerance, or vision for their future. So before asking someone what they think, maybe ask yourself, why am I asking this particular person? Do I genuinely value their wisdom? Do they have experience I can learn from? Do they understand what actually matters to me? Or am I just hoping they'll agree with me? Because sometimes we're not looking for wisdom. We're looking for consensus, and consensus isn't always available. I can listen to someone's advice without handing them the authority to make my decision. And I want to stop here for a second because I think this is where the conversation becomes personal. Because while you've been listening, there's already something that came to mind. Something you've been thinking about, something you've been talking about, something you've been asking people about, something you already know you want, but you haven't allowed yourself to fully choose yet. So I have another prompt here for you guys. What are you waiting for someone else to give you permission to do? Change your mind, start over, leave, stay, apply, say no, want more, want less, rest, spend the money, save the money, try something nobody around you understands, and then ask yourself, what would change if I stopped waiting? Because maybe you don't need another opinion. Maybe you don't need another conversation. Maybe you don't need to explain yourself one more time. Maybe the permission you're waiting for was never supposed to come from somebody else. And of course, I also think there's a faith piece to this because sometimes we're waiting for people to understand a decision that maybe they were never meant to completely understand. And I want to be careful with how I say that. I'm not saying that every decision we make is automatically God's plan because it's something that we really want to do. We still need discernment, we need wisdom, we should pray, and we should be willing to listen when people we trust bring something to our attention. But I also believe that God can place something on your heart that other people aren't going to fully understand. God gave you your specific path to walk. The people around you don't have your exact experiences. They don't have your gifts. They don't know every conversation you've had with God, and they weren't given your specific path to walk. Sometimes we're trying so hard to get somebody around us to understand the plan before we're willing to move forward with it. But maybe they were never supposed to understand every part of it. Not everyone is meant to understand every decision you make along the way. And honestly, sometimes the decisions you're being led toward might not completely make sense to you yet. You might not have the perfect explanation. You might not know exactly where it's going to lead. And that's where discernment becomes really personal. Maybe the prayer isn't, God, make everybody understand what I'm doing so I can finally feel comfortable doing it. Maybe it's, God, give me the discernment to know whether this is where you're leading me, even if everyone around me doesn't understand yet. Because other people's understanding cannot always be the requirement for your obedience. And again, that doesn't mean ignoring wise counsel. It doesn't mean assuming that anyone who disagrees with you is wrong. Guidance and permission are two different things. I can pray, I can seek wisdom, I can listen to people I trust, I can look honestly at what's in front of me, and eventually, I still have to choose. And maybe part of trusting God is also trusting that I don't have to make every decision perfectly. If I take a step and need to be redirected later, God can redirect me. I can ask God for guidance without being afraid to make a decision. And I don't need everybody else to understand a path that wasn't given to them to walk. And I want to bring this back to where we started. Nobody ever sat us down and said, okay, you're an adult now. You don't have to ask us anymore. Maybe that's because nobody was ever going to. Maybe part of becoming an adult is realizing that there are certain things nobody else can decide for you. You can ask for advice, you can pray, you can research, and you can talk to people you trust. But eventually you have to decide what you're going to do with your own life. And yes, sometimes you'll make a decision and later realize you want something different. That's part of being responsible for your own life too. You get to learn, you get to adjust, you get to choose again. So I have one final prompt for you guys, and I want you to really sit with this one. If nobody could approve or disapprove of your decision, what would you choose? Not what your parents would have chosen, not what would make the most sense to your friends, not what would look best on social media, not what would make everybody else comfortable. What would you choose? And maybe the answer is exactly what you're already doing. And that's okay too. This isn't about changing your life just for the sake of changing it. It's about making sure that when you say yes, it's actually your yes. And when you say no, it's actually your no. Because at the end of the day, I am allowed to make decisions for the life I am responsible living. And before we end, I want to take a moment to pray per usual. So put your hand on your chest and take a deep breath. Dear God, thank you for the life you've given me and for the people you've placed around me who love me, guide me, challenge me, and want the best for me. Help me recognize the difference between seeking wisdom and seeking permission. Give me discernment to know whose advice I should listen to, and help me hear your guidance when fear, expectations, and everybody else's opinions feel louder. Help me honor the people who have sacrificed for me without allowing guilt to make my decisions for me. And when someone I love disagrees with me, help me listen with humility without automatically assuming that their disagreement means I'm wrong. I don't want to make decisions just to prove that I can do things my own way. But I also don't want fear of disappointing someone to keep me from where you're leading me. Give me wisdom to know the difference. And when I don't have complete certainty, remind me that I don't need every step figured out. If I need to be directed, redirect me. If I'm moving too quickly, slow me down. If fear is holding me back, give me courage. And if I'm exactly where I need to be, give me peace. I trust you with the decisions I'm making. I trust you with the things I can't see yet. And I trust that I don't need anyone else to understand the path you have for me in order to keep walking it. Amen. And before you go, I want you to take that question with you this week. What are you waiting for someone else to give you permission to do? And no, that doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow, move across the country, end a relationship, or completely change your life because you listened to one podcast episode. Please don't come back next week blaming me. But I do want you to notice when you're asking for advice. Notice whose opinion you're looking for. And especially notice those moments when you already know what you want, but you're still waiting for someone else to tell you, yes, you're allowed. Because maybe one of the things we're learning in adulthood is that sometimes we have to learn how to say that to ourselves. If today's conversation resonated with you, I hope it reminded you that it's never too late to learn something you were never taught. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with someone who might need this conversation too. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I would appreciate if you left a rating or review. It helps more people find the show and allows these conversations to reach somebody who might need them. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Unfiltered and Unapologetic Pod. And you can find more resources in my Stan store through the link in my Instagram bio and in the show notes. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, you can ask for advice without asking for permission. You are the one responsible for living your life. And sometimes the path God gave you won't make sense to anybody else. It wasn't given to them to walk. I'll see you in the next episode.